Okay, hi everyone. Paul and I'd like to welcome to our second in a series where we invite special guests on to share their knowledge and experience. Today we have a professional coach who has deep roots in Virginia. John Pascarella was with Sporting Kansas City from 2009 to 16, Des Moines Menace of the PDL in 2017. 2018 he joined Minnesota United, and now he's in the first season as OKC Energy FC head coach of the USL. Before that, though, John was with, he had Virginia roots, and he was with Northern Virginia Royals, and dear to my heart, the Virginia ODP program. So welcome, John. Great to have you with us.
Guys, it's great to be here, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. It's like alphabet soup going through all of those. BYS.
Did I miss anything in there, John?
SKC, and I don't know because it's been kind of a long journey, but it's been a hell of a fun one. So thank you for the introduction, and thanks for having me on.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're aiming it at our club TDs and DOCs. So a lot of these people that run their own clubs, they have to pick a staff.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, they're looking at technical staff, goalkeeping staff. What do you look for when you pick a staff? Is it strictly technical background? Is it humanistic? What sort of elements do you look for when you're picking a staff to surround you? Because now you've had to do it twice with Des Moines and OKC.
Yep. Yeah, it just did it recently with this staff here in OKC, and the thing, and hopefully I'm getting even better at it as I go along. We all get better at it as we go along. But the thing I've come to find is that for me, the most important piece is going after people that can fill in the gaps of the things that I'm not good at, or the things that I really don't want to do. And there's some things in every job description that some you're better than others, and others you just have absolutely no passion for, no volition to do. So I looked for those things in my staff, and I would continue to if I had to. So even on my current staff, I look for guys that had more knowledge in terms of technology than I do, because I'm okay with it, but I'm limited, and I'm in my 50s, and to have a younger guy who's in his 20s or 30s who's cutting edge with that stuff would be helpful, especially with the way we edit the modern game. I think that was an important piece of it. I think somebody with a different personality than mine, because I am fairly upbeat all the time. And sometimes it's good to have on your staff somebody that's not Debbie Downer, but somebody that has, I don't want to say a more realistic approach, but looks at the negative more often than I do, so that it gives you a balance when you're having discussions. I think those things are important. So counterbalancing personalities. But I think the most important thing is having it be specific to the job. So for example, in my case, it wasn't important that I had someone that was necessarily good at or had a volition to do a lot of the training sessions or the tactics with the team. But I did need someone who had a hell of a lot of experience and understanding of the USL as a league, and in particular the Western Conference, because I know the league fairly well because I did some scouting of it in the last 10 years for MLS, but I don't know it as well as someone who's coached in it. And I certainly don't know it as well as someone who coached in the Western Conference. So that was one of the things I looked for, as well as some of the technical abilities in the staff. Just so happened that a former player of mine that I had for a very brief period of time, came available because Fresno was folding as the season was ending last year. So we picked someone off of their staff. And the other thing I thought that was important here, and I think is important if you're going into a new job, not necessarily if you're hiring a new staff, is having somebody on board that actually knows the lay of the land at that organization. In our club here, I kept on the goalkeeper coach from last year. He's been in this area for 20 years. He's originally English, but came over for university stuff and has been involved in the old Rio team here in OKC in the NASL, knows the USL, was in this league and in this club last year and the last 2 years. So he knows the organization fairly well. So it made sense because, again, he knew the league, he knew the conference, and he knows the movers and shakers within the organization. And that's something that's good for a new coach or a new someone that's involved in the decision-making group to be connected to and to have that background. So those are the things I look for. Those are the things I looked for in the staff this year.
Okay. Paul, do you have a question for him?
Yeah, I do. So John, again, we've known you for a long time, and culture is so important to you. Anytime we talk with you, it's about building that collective and getting the team together. So, what are some things that now that you're in this role, what are some things that you have looked to kind of check off your box as far as building the culture?
The most important thing for me is that it's really a daily thing. You can build the culture intentionally, or you can have it done haphazardly. I'd much rather do it intentionally. And so I know that they're going to watch my lead and people are going to follow what I do. So if I say I want it to be a respectful culture and I want respect to permeate throughout the room and the locker room, I've got to make sure I treat people that way. I've got to make sure I give it before I ever get it. That's one of the ways that I'm going to have to earn that. I'm going to have to give it before I ever get it. So you model it, you do it from the top down. I think it's important that they understand, and I try to live by the motto or the philosophy that it doesn't matter how much, it doesn't really matter. People don't care how much I know. What they want to know is how much I care. And so I have to show that every day. And so the important things are that I'm making those connections every day with the players. Now, how do you do that and how do you create that culture? You do it very slowly. You do it day by day. You do it by implementing it. You do it by making sure that your staff is reinforcing it. You make sure that you call it out when you see it in a way that doesn't conform to what you believe in, and you hold people accountable to it. So that's one way of doing it, and that's kind of top down. And I want to create a culture in this environment here at OKC. But I also know that I can't just do it from the top down. It has to come from the ground up as well. And it's interesting because the timing of it fit in well with this natural break that we've had with COVID. So much of this we've been doing online and through Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how that all dove together with COVID and
and it does. It has quite well, and it would be better to be in an intimate room having these discussions. But it's been an easy way to keep in touch, to keep those touchstones and that communication and that modeling from the top open, almost on a daily basis. So we do it with workouts, but we also do it with connecting with them and trying to find out what their values are. What is it that are their objectives for this season, for their career at this point in time, at this stop in OKC? And then what is it that's important to them? What are those objectives and goals? And then what are the values and beliefs? What are the words, the phrases that we all believe in that can lead to those objectives? And so that's the part that we're kind of noodling through as small groups and as the whole team right now, because those principles, those beliefs, those values that come to the surface in those small meetings and those team meetings, those large group meetings, we now pick and choose those ones as a group and say, well, interestingly enough, the staff has had this discussion and we value these same three things. And now we've guided them down the road from the top down, but from the bottom up with their input on what the values are and what the buzzwords are and the actions are, the behaviors are that we're going to have to enact throughout the season that are going to get us to those objectives and those goals.
Right. So as you look to...
Sure, John, just to build on that, do you, when you're looking at the players and you're trying to build a culture, do you look at the human characteristics of the people? Like what happens if you've got a talented player that you like, but is just a bad apple in the locker room? Mm-hmm. You live with that? Do you try and root it out? Do you try and educate it? What's your take on it?
I would try to educate it first, but I would try not to have that in the first place. And I've been lucky here in OKC that I was pretty much able to build the team because they only had 8 returning players from last year. We now have 24, so I was able to add 16 in. And so you obviously look for good players, but you look for good people. You look for good characters. You look for, and you try to, through your network, find out how other people, how these players that you bring in behave in certain situations, how they deal with stress, how they deal with teammates, how they deal with people from different cultures. All those things are important because you spend a shitload of time together, to be fair.
Yeah.
You spend 10 months together, you spend in the locker room every day, and you spend it under pressure. I don't care what anyone says, because there's a stress there that will separate any kind of cracks and fissures that appear throughout the time. So you do it by trying to find guys that, there's a lot of good soccer players, but you got to find the ones whose values match yours.
Yeah.
You know, that's really a big deal. So.
Hey, so now that you have been,
to go back, Gordon, to your question,
Sure.
How do you deal with the ones in your locker room? I haven't had to do it a lot as a head coach. I've done it a little bit and been part of staffs that have done it as an assistant, but you weed them out pretty quickly. Once you've established a culture and you have a bad apple, most of them have to go with the culture. And so they bend and they change a little bit. And I can name a few guys. I'd rather not, but I can think of a few guys in my career where that's happened. But you have to quickly decide if they're not going to, are they really worth it? And in most cases, they're not. I don't care what kind of production you're getting.
Right. So now that you've been connected on different webinars and small groups, and when you return back to action, what would be the first kind of things you do when you get everybody back in the soccer field, away from juggling toilet paper, whatever?
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I've thought about what would I say to the team in the locker room, almost like that first day back.
Yeah.
And I had to go through this. Again, I draw on the experience that I just had 8 weeks ago, when I walked into the locker room at OKC for the first time. And instead of giving them this really long-winded discussion, it was really a 5-minute presentation on the fact that I was there to earn their trust. They needed to, and I put up a slide that had that philosophy that I talked about with you guys earlier. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
Put that up on a slide, and it was the only slide in the entire presentation. And the point was, I had to prove to them that I cared. Because if I got them to open up their hearts, they would then open up their ears. If you got their hearts and minds, they'd open up their ears. Then you could start to get to them tactically, technically, and start to build the kind of soccer team you wanted. But first you had to get to them as people, as humans. And so the first thing I think I'd say when I get back to them, because I think we've done a good job of it during the break, is I'd bring them in. I would throw that same thing up on the screen. And I would say, in the last month, in the last 6 weeks, in the last 2 months, do you feel like we care? Do you feel like we've been there for you? Do you feel like we're all part of the same family as we've gone through this? And then I'd take them right the hell outside and start playing again. That's what I would say.